My grandson plunged his bare hand into a burning fireplace to save the only photograph he had of the grandmother he never met. And less than an hour later, I was the one locked in a storage room, listening through the door while two women planned to have me arrested in my own home. I never thought I'd be telling this story to anyone, let alone strangers on the internet, but some stories need to be told as a warning, not for sympathy. If you've ever watched something irreplaceable get destroyed by someone who simply didn't value it the way you did, you already know the particular kind of grief I'm about to describe. Stay with me tonight, because what happened in the hours that followed changed everything about how I understood my own family. My name is Desmond Hale. It started on a Tuesday, the rain coming down soft and steady outside, turning the whole world the color of wet slate. I was sitting in the living room of the house I built with my own hands outside Camden, Maine, not reading, just watching the fire. The flames threw long shadows across the walls, their warmth pushing back against the damp chill leaking in from outside. That fireplace had always been more than a source of heat. It was the heart of our home. It was where my late wife Vivian and I used to sit for hours, talking about our hopes, our worries, our plans for our son Callum. It was where she held my hand through the hard years, and where we celebrated the small victories nobody else would have noticed. It was the place I still felt her presence most strongly, even 6 years after she was gone. And right above that fireplace, in a simple silver frame, was the last photograph ever taken of her. Not a staged portrait, a candid shot from our front porch on a sunny summer afternoon, her hair a little windblown, laughing at something I'd said a second before the shutter clicked. It captured her exactly the way I remembered her best. Joyful, kind, alive. It was the only picture my grandson Finn had ever seen of her. He was 13, born 2 years after she passed, and that photograph was his entire connection to a woman he'd never had the chance to meet. He'd stand in front of it sometimes, tracing the edge of the frame with his fingers, asking me questions. What was her favorite food, Grandpa? Did she like to sing? Do you think she would have liked me? I'd tell him story after story, and his eyes would light up with a mixture of wonder and quiet sadness that always caught me off guard. That photograph was sacred, to both of us. That evening, the quiet of the room broke apart all at once. The front door slammed open, and the sound of complaining came pouring in ahead of them. My daughter-in-law Isla and my son Callum were home. Isla was a tall woman with sharp features and a voice that could cut glass clean through. She'd never really settled into our home from the day she and Callum married. There was always a subtle, persistent friction underneath everything. She thought the house was too old-fashioned. She thought my stories bored everyone. But mostly, I think, she resented Vivian's memory. It was as if my late wife's ghost had become a permanent rival for her husband's affection, and for her own place as the woman of the house. "This place is so dark," she announced, stomping mud off her shoes onto the hardwood, "and it smells like dust and old people. We need to bring this place into the century we're actually living in." Callum, she's in one of her moods. I could already see the storm gathering behind her eyes. Finn trailed in behind them, shoulders hunched, a book clutched tight against his chest. He had a gentle, quiet nature, the complete opposite of his mother's abrasiveness. He gave me a small, sad smile, his eyes saying what he couldn't put into words. I smiled back and gave him a slight nod. "The fire's warm, buddy. The house is safe." I knew what was coming. Isla was on one of her crusades, pick a fight with Callum, belittle the house, complain about the wallpaper, the food, whatever was closest at hand. It had become a constant low hum of tension in our lives. Callum just stood there, exhausted. He was a good man caught between two people he loved, without ever quite knowing how to bridge the growing distance between us. "Isla, please, we just got home," he said, trying to diffuse things before they escalated. "Can we just have a quiet evening?" A quiet evening had never been Isla's style. She was a storm looking for somewhere to land, rarely satisfied, always destructive when she got there. She walked over to the mantel, her eyes scanning it with open disgust, and landed on the silver-framed photograph of Vivian. I saw her lip curl. My heart started pounding. I knew that look. It was pure contempt. "Callum, I've told you 1,000 times," she snapped, jabbing a manicured finger toward the picture. "This has to go. It's depressing. It's like walking into a museum dedicated to someone's death. Every time I'm in this room, I feel like I'm being watched. It's morbid. She's been dead over 10 years. For God's sake. I'm the woman of this house now, and I want that picture gone. It's dragging this whole living room down." Callum sighed, rubbing his temples. "Isla, please. It's the only picture Finn has of his grandmother. Dad doesn't want it taken down, and I honestly don't see the harm. The harm? Her voice climbed to a dangerous pitch. The harm is that it keeps you living inside your past life. It's like you're still married to a ghost. Finn doesn't need a dead grandmother to look up to, Callum. He has a living, breathing mother. Me. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Her face had gone red, her hands balled into fists. I stayed silent. I'd learned a long time ago that engaging with her in this state only made things worse. I looked over at Finn. He'd gone pale, his eyes wide with something close to fear, watching his mother with the look of a child who's seen this before, but who somehow senses this time is different. If you've ever watched a child brace themselves for a storm they've already learned to predict, you know that particular helplessness doesn't leave you easily, no matter how many times you've seen it coming. She wasn't just arguing anymore. She moved with a swift, almost theatrical certainty. Heels clicking sharp against the wood floor, she crossed to the mantel and wrapped her fingers around the silver frame. Isla, no, Callum shouted, stepping forward. I was frozen in my chair. I couldn't move. My voice caught somewhere in my throat, and it felt exactly like watching a car crash unfold in slow motion, every second stretching longer than it should. She ignored him completely. She pulled the photograph free of its frame and held it up for all of us to see Vivian's laughing face frozen in time, a stark and terrible contrast against the hatred on Isla's face. It's time to let go of the past, Arthur, she said, turning to me with a cruel little smile, calling me by the wrong instinct in her fury, though I barely registered it at the time. You need to accept she's gone. She's not coming back. And I'm done living in her shrine. And then she did the unthinkable. She walked the few steps to the fireplace. The fire was blazing, hungry in the hearth. Without a flicker of hesitation, she tossed the photograph straight into the flames. No, I finally managed to scream, but the word got lost in the crackle of the fire. I watched the only irreplaceable memory of my wife begin to curl and blacken at the edges. The laughter, the joy, all of it consumed in a matter of seconds. I think I stopped breathing entirely. The grandfather clock in the hall, the fire, everything faded into a kind of ringing silence. My heart had simply stopped. Then there was a blur of motion. Finn let out a sound I will never forget, a raw, gut-deep howl of grief and fury. "Nana," he screamed, and then he did the one thing none of us saw coming. He ran, not away from the fire, but straight toward it. He sprinted past his mother, past his father, and threw himself at the hearth before anyone could stop him. Before Callum could even react, Finn thrust his bare hand into the dancing flames, trying to pull the photograph back out. I heard a sickening hiss. I smelled burning skin. "Finn!" I screamed, finally breaking loose from my chair, my old bones protesting every inch of the movement, my heart slamming against my ribs. Callum was right beside me, his face a mask of pure horror. Finn let out a blood-curdling scream and yanked his hand back. The photograph itself was gone, turned entirely to ash, but clutched in his fist was a small, blackened, unburned corner, a fragment of Vivian's dress. His hand was already blistering, red and raw, a wound that would scar him for the rest of his life. And he held that scrap of paper like it was the single most precious thing in the world, tears streaming down his soot-streaked face. I want to be honest with you. I don't know if I could have stayed on my feet if I'd been the one holding my hand in that fire. What that boy did in that instant was pure, uncalculated love, and it terrified me every bit as much as it broke my heart. I watched something flicker across Isla's face in that moment. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't remorse. It was annoyance. She rolled her eyes and let out a sharp, frustrated sigh. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Finn. It was just an old picture. Don't be so dramatic," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. That coldness, the complete absence of empathy for her own son's injury, was the final straw for Callum. Years of pent-up frustration, disrespect, and quiet erosion all came crashing down at once. I saw a rage in my son's eyes I had never once seen in his entire life. He didn't say a word. He turned to his wife, and he struck her the back of his hand across her cheek. She stumbled backward, shock and disbelief written across her face, her hand flying up to touch the mark. It was the first time in their marriage he had ever raised a hand to her. For a single second, I felt a flash of shame for my son. It was instantly eclipsed by a surge of protectiveness for Finn, and by a raw, justified fury at what Isla had just allowed to happen to her own child. "Get out of my sight," Callum growled, his voice low and shaking. He didn't wait for a response. He scooped Finn up carefully, avoiding the burned hand, and said, "Dad, call the hospital. I'm taking him now." Then he rushed out the door, leaving me standing alone in the living room, the smell of scorched photograph and burned skin thick in the air. I stared at the fireplace, at the ashes where my wife's face had been, then at the woman who'd caused all of it. And that's when Isla turned to me. Her hand was still pressed to her reddening cheek, and her eyes had gone from shock to a newfound terrifying fury. All the pretense had dropped away. Underneath it was something genuinely venomous, and it was aimed entirely at me, not at Callum, who'd struck her, but at me, the old man who'd raised him. "You," she hissed, pointing a trembling finger. "This is all your fault. You and your precious memories. If you'd just let me throw that stupid picture out, none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have been so dramatic. And Callum wouldn't have hit me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was blaming me for her own cruelty, for her son's burned hand, for every consequence of a choice she'd made herself, standing 3 feet from a lit fireplace. "It's your fault my son got hurt. It's your fault my husband hit me," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You've always been in the way. You and that dead woman's ghost, always whispering in his ear, making him weak." I started backing away, my legs suddenly feeling every one of my 70-some years. I'd just seen a glimpse of something in her I'd never let myself acknowledge before, and it frightened me. "Isla, please, just calm down," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "We need to get to the hospital. We need to see how Finn's doing." "Shut up," she shrieked. "You're not going anywhere. You're going to stay right here and pay for what you've done." Before I could react, she lunged, grabbing my arm with a grip far stronger than I expected. Her nails dug into my skin as she shoved me backward. I stumbled, my back hitting the wall. She shoved me down the hallway, toward the guest room at the end, the one we used for storage, the one with a heavy lock on the outside. "You want to talk about the past so much?" she spat, shoving me inside. "Then you can sit in it and rot." The door slammed. I heard the lock click. I was trapped, alone in the dark, lit only by a faint street lamp glow through the window. Boxes of old clothes and forgotten furniture surrounded me. A prisoner, in my own home. If you've ever felt completely powerless in a place that was supposed to be safe, you already know the specific, suffocating quiet that settles in right after the door shuts. I stood there, my heart pounding, my arm throbbing where she'd grabbed it. I could hear her muttering on the other side of the door, her heels pacing back and forth. Then I heard the unmistakable murmur of a phone call. "Mom, you need to get over here right now." He hit me. Callum slapped me. "Yes, Desmond's locked in the back room. That old fool is going to be a problem. We need to figure this out before he gets back." She was calling her mother Rosalind. I knew Rosalind. She was every bit as sharp and every bit as greedy as her daughter. Together, the two of them were a force of pure, focused venom. My mind raced. What were they planning? What were they going to do to me? To Callum? To Finn? I searched the room desperately, looking for anything I could use. No phone on me. My pocket watch was in the other room. The window was painted shut. I was, plainly and completely, stuck. Then I remembered. An old prepaid phone, buried in the bottom drawer of the ancient desk in that very room, something I used to keep for work calls years ago, held onto as an emergency backup. I didn't even know if it still had a charge. My hands were shaking as I yanked the drawer open, digging through old bills and rusted paper clips until I found it buried beneath a stack of yellowed maps. I pressed the power button. The screen flickered to life. Thank God. It still had a sliver of charge left. I didn't have Callum's number memorized, it lived in my other phone, but I knew the hospital's number by heart. I dialed, my pulse hammering in my ears. "City Hospital," a calm, professional voice answered. I kept my own voice down to a frantic whisper. "Yes, this is Desmond Hale. My son, Callum Hale, just brought in his son, Finn. A burn. I need to speak to my son right now." "It's an emergency." The operator put me on hold. The seconds stretched out like hours. I could hear Isla pacing outside the door, her voice a steady, angry drone. Then another voice joined hers, deep, authoritative, cruel. Rosalind. She'd arrived. They were both here now. They were planning something. I had to get word to Callum. The line clicked. "Dad." His voice came through frantic, thick with worry. "Dad, are you okay? We're at the hospital. Finn's being treated. What's going on? Is Isla there?" "Callum, listen to me," I whispered urgently, cupping my hand over the phone. Your wife locked me in the guest room. She called her mother. They're both here in the house right now. They're planning something, Callum. Something bad. You need to come back. Bring help. I think they're going to try and hurt me. Take everything." "I knew it," he said, his voice hardening instantly. "I knew she'd do something. Stay on the line, Dad. Don't hang up. I'm coming. I'm calling the police right now." The line went quiet, but I kept it pressed to my ear, praying he'd stay connected. I could hear muffled voices through the door. It sounded like an argument. I pressed my ear flat against the wood, straining to catch every word. "Then we tell the police he attacked me," Isla said, her voice suddenly clear and loud enough to carry. "The old man's losing his mind. He's been getting more violent by the month. He attacked me, and Callum's trying to cover it up. We need to be ready. When he walks in, we act like the victims." "Yeah," Rosalind's voice joined in. "And the house. We need to make sure Callum understands what's actually at stake here. He's going to have to choose. The old man and the boy. Or you." My blood went cold. They were going to frame me. Have me arrested for attacking Isla, just to get me out of the picture entirely. They wanted the house. They were willing to tear this family apart one lie at a time to get their hands on my property. I have never been a violent man, not once in my life. But in that moment I felt a rage so clean, so righteous, it frightened even me. I was locked in a cage inside my own home, but I had a sliver of a chance: the phone, the call I'd already made, and Callum on his way with police behind him. I stayed crouched by the door, listening to them rehearse their story like actors before a performance, painting me as a violent, senile old man ready to destroy my reputation for the sake of a deed. Then, right in the middle of their planning, I heard tires crunch on the gravel outside. Rosalind's voice cut off mid-sentence. A car door slammed. Then another, and another. Multiple vehicles. The heavy tread of boots on the porch. Then the banging on the front door. "Police! Open up!" "I'll get it," Isla said, her voice shifting instantly, sweet and innocent. She was already performing. I heard the door open. Muffled voices, her smooth, practiced lies weaving through the officer's questions. "Officer, thank God you're here. My husband attacked me. My father-in-law, he's not right in the head anymore. He tried to attack me too. I had to lock him away for my own safety." Footsteps approached the storage room door. My heart was pounding so loudly I was certain they could hear it right through the wood. "I want to slow this next part down for you, because I've relived it more times than I can count." The lock clicked, the door swung open, and I was momentarily blinded by a flashlight beam. 2 officers stood in the doorway. Behind them, Callum's face was a thundercloud of fury, and behind him, in the hallway, Isla and Rosalind stood with expressions of carefully arranged, fake concern. "Are you Desmond Hale?" one officer asked. "Yes, sir," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm the one who called. My daughter-in-law locked me in here. She's trying to frame me for assault. It's a lie." "He's losing his mind," Isla screamed from behind the officers. "He's violent. He's making all of this up." "Ma'am, please stay calm," the officer said evenly, then turned to Callum, who gave a grim, silent nod. "Dad, are you okay?" Callum pushed past the officers and gripped my arm. "Did she hurt you?" "I'm fine, son," I said, holding up the old phone. "I'm fine. I have a recording. I have a recording of everything they said." That single sentence stopped the entire hallway cold. Isla's face went white. Rosalind's followed a half-second later. Callum stared at me like he couldn't quite believe what he'd just heard. The lead officer, a gruff man with a surprisingly kind face, stepped closer. "A recording?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. "I recorded their conversation," I said, handing him the phone. "I recorded them planning to frame me for assault so they could take the house. They wanted me gone so Isla could take everything. I hadn't been recording the whole time, only the last couple of minutes, once I understood what they were actually plotting." The officer took the phone and played it back. Their tiny, distorted voices filled the hallway, laying out the entire plan in their own words. Isla's jaw dropped. She started stammering, trying to construct an excuse on the spot, but it was already far too late. The officer's tone shifted, professional neutrality hardening into stern authority. "Isla Hale. Rosalind Evans?" Rosalind's voice cracked as she confirmed her own name. "You're both under arrest for conspiracy, unlawful imprisonment, and child endangerment," the officer said. "The child endangerment charge relates to the incident at the fireplace tonight." Relief washed over me as the officers moved to cuff them both. Isla was crying now, real tears, panicked and furious all at once. You can't do this. This is a misunderstanding. I'm his wife. This is my home. The officer wasn't moved in the slightest. Ma'am, you can explain all of that to the judge. As they were led out, I watched Rosalind's head bow in something close to shame, and Isla's face twist with a hatred she no longer bothered hiding. In a matter of minutes, everyone who'd been plotting my downfall was walked out of my own home in handcuffs, their careful plans reduced to nothing. After the patrol cars pulled away, the house fell into an eerie quiet, broken only by the crackle of the fire in the next room. Callum and I stood together in the hallway, staring at the empty space where all of it had just happened. Dad, he said, his voice thick, I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I didn't want to see how bad it had actually gotten. I failed you. I failed Finn. No, son, I said, resting a hand on his arm. You didn't fail anyone. You were trying to hold your family together, and in the end, you did. You came when I needed you most. You saved me. We drove to the hospital in near silence, but it was a good silence, the kind that comes after a weight finally lifts off your chest. We found Finn with his hand heavily bandaged, looking small and exhausted in the hospital bed. But when he saw us, he smiled. Grandpa, are you okay? Did they get her? Did the police get her? Yes, buddy, I said, taking his good hand in mine. They got her. She can't hurt any of us anymore. He looked down at his bandaged hand, then back up at me. I'm sorry about Nana's picture, Grandpa, he whispered, a tear rolling down his cheek. I tried to save it. The memory of what he'd done, risking his own skin for the memory of a woman he'd never even had the chance to meet, nearly broke me completely. That, right there, is the true measure of a family. Not blood, love, not possession, sacrifice. It's okay, Finn, I said, my own eyes filling. It's just a picture. I've got every memory I need right here, in my heart, and I've got you. The weeks that followed passed in a blur. Isla and Rosalind went to trial, the recording serving as the central piece of evidence. Their scheme to frame me and seize the house was laid bare in open court. Their motive, in the end, was ordinary. Ugly greed. The house Vivian and I had built from nothing was worth a small fortune, and they'd planned to manipulate Callum, take control of the property, and quietly remove me from the picture entirely. Both women were convicted. The judge was especially unforgiving on the child endangerment charge. Callum and Finn stayed with me. The truth of what had happened had shattered their old life, but it had also pulled the two of them closer than I'd seen in years. The divorce was finalized quickly. Callum came out the other side lighter, more present, more like the son I remembered raising. The house didn't feel like a place of echoes anymore. It felt like a place of new life. The grief of watching that photograph burn didn't sting the way it once had, because I now had something even more precious than an old picture. I had my grandson, carrying a scar on his hand that he'll have for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of both his mother's cruelty and his own extraordinary bravery. Some nights, we sit by that same fire, the one that nearly destroyed everything we had. I tell Finn the real stories about his grandmother, the ones I keep folded away in my heart. He listens with wide eyes, sometimes touching the empty space on the mantel where the photograph used to hang. And when I look at that same empty space now, I smile, because I know Vivian would have been so proud of that boy. This story taught me something I still carry with me every single day. The mistake most of us make is assuming the people closest to us will always value what we value, simply because they share our home or our name. If there's one thing you take from tonight, let it be this. Pay attention to how the people in your life treat the things and the memories that matter most to you when they think no one's really watching. That tells you far more than any argument ever could. And here's a question worth sitting with quietly tonight. Is there someone in your own life you've been excusing, simply because you haven't yet seen what they're capable of when they feel truly threatened? I'd genuinely like to know what you think about how all of this played out. Drop a 1 in the comments if you think Callum was right to react the way he did in that moment. Drop a 2 if you think he should have walked away from the marriage the very first time he saw her cruelty, or drop a 3 if you think there was still a better way through all of it. Tell me where you're watching this from tonight, and what time it is where you are right now. And if you've ever had someone close to you turn out to be capable of something you never thought possible, I want to hear that story from you too. If tonight's story stayed with you the way it stayed with me, hit subscribe, because I've got more stories like this one coming, about family, grief, and the truth that only shows up once everything else falls away. Thank you for sitting with me through this one. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Camden, Maine to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.